All right, everyone, we are here. So, GaKnew, thank you very much for coming to join me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's awesome. I'm really glad we have the chance to connect today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, you have a great story.
Thanks.
Multidisciplinary artist. Writer, lyricist, animator. You do murals. I saw a lot of your artwork online. Really, really fascinating.
Thanks.
So where are you from originally? Let's go like back and figure out how you came to this spot. Yeah.
Originally, Compton, California. My family is from Compton. And then from there, I kind of moved about quite a bit throughout like South Central Los Angeles, and a bit nomadic growing up in that sense. So kind of all over LA, even to living in the Hollywood area. So
Right. Did you ever leave LA as a kid?
not to live anywhere. I've been to a lot of different places throughout the country, and even a little bit of out the country, but I've always lived in Los Angeles.
Right. And what was life growing up like in Compton? I mean, we've all heard stories. I've been to Compton before, but it's obviously much different now than it was like 20, 30 years ago. But what was it like kind of growing up then?
Me growing up, I was born in the 70s, 76. So for me as a small kid, it was very different than the Compton that people know today, or like Compton from NWA.
Right.
When I was a small kid, it was more of a suburban feel. We played baseball on the street, football on the street, and but then like mid 80s, when the whole crack epidemic happened, you really saw like the community change to where kids weren't outside playing anymore.
Yeah.
It really wasn't safe because we would go, all the kids, we would just walk to the park and to play sports and stuff like that, and it just wasn't that environment anymore. So for me, I kind of saw two different sides of it.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because I've lived abroad for 25 years, and now I'm kind of coming back and reconnecting with North America, and one of the great things about growing up in the United States is the safety of your local neighborhood, being able to play basketball on the street, or being able to play American football on the street with your friends, and having that to be like a safe environment for you to like grow up in, because going out in the community as a kid is like an expected right for you if you grow up in North America. And I grew up in Canada almost, and it's the same. Like we played basketball, we played ice, we played roller hockey, football. Growing up outside in the community is such a big thing for young kids here, and it's not in other parts of the world. Like you go to places in China or places in Asia specifically, actually, which is where most of my experiences is, and the cities are just too dense. Too densely populated, too many high-rise buildings, not enough space. But here in LA, obviously, we have a lot of people, but we also have a lot of space to do things, so it's quite nice.
Well, we kind of have both things, because I've definitely lived in communities where you couldn't play outside like that.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, in the more where there's homes and stuff like that, then kids can more play outside. But I believe you see a lot less of that now than when I was a young kid.
Sure. And so where'd you go to school when you were a kid?
I went to like 5 different elementary schools. Okay. So that's, like I said, I lived in Compton, South Central, Inglewood. But once I got to middle school, high school, I went to John Burroughs Junior High School, which is off Wilshire and McCatton, which is more more closer to Hollywood, I would say. And then and I went to Fairfax High School, which is in Hollywood. So it's kind of my high school experience was drastically different from my elementary school experience, which I feel like crafted me in a lot of ways.
So what was it like in elementary school?
I mean, yes, I feel like it's stereotypical.
I can't even remember
songs about it.
Yeah, I can't even remember elementary school. Like you and I are about the same age, late 70s, right? And I can't remember much from elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Not like I was blocking stuff out because it was so bad. It's just been.
It says that too, though. She says that she doesn't remember much of her like childhood like that. But for me, it's like yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, you got a great memory.
Yeah. apparently.
So, I mean, so growing up, so tell me a little bit about the difference between that elementary school experience and the high school experience. So how is it drastically different? Was it just because the schools were located in different parts of LA? Is that enough to justify, having that different experience?
Well, it's the East Side is what they call it, where I was going to elementary school. So I lived in a lot of neighborhoods with a lot of gang violence and drugs and stuff like that. And I was a latchkey kid, so I often caught the bus back and forth going to school and being at home alone after school. So I would say that environment, the people in that environment are just used to confrontation more, or physical violence is more dominant in that space. Whereas once I began to go to high school on the West Side, it just wasn't the norm. And so for me as a kid, I had to learn that the coping mechanisms that I picked up in one space didn't work for me in the new space, so for me, I had to do a lot of evolution as a junior high school kid in high school.
It's amazing, because I've been quite lucky. I've traveled a lot of the world, making television shows and stuff like that. And what I've learned in the very little time I've been in LA, so I have almost no experience here, other than traveling for work over the years. But to actually trying to live here, right? I actually feel like LA, obviously, and its surrounding boroughs or neighborhoods or districts is huge, right?
Yeah, it's massive.
And I feel like there are parts of LA that are different, that are more different than like entire countries are different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can be in a part of LA where, the community, the feel, the level of safety, the language is completely different from another country.
Well,
even it's like having many countries in just one city is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that, especially for me growing up in different neighborhoods. There was a point in time where I lived in Huntington Park as a kid, and which was predominantly Hispanic, which was a new experience for me. And it was very different. What the thing that I appreciate about that though is it gets rid of the stereotypes.
Right.
Because when you stay in a bubble, everyone has prejudiced views about different spaces. But when you get to live in that space amongst the people and interact with people, you begin to see like all the stereotypes aren't true.
Yeah. Everything from the outside looking in is totally different than the people who are living in the bubbles. Yeah.
So I appreciated that experience of being nomadic and moving into different spaces and dealing with a lot of different people at a young age, because it shaped my lens and the way I move forward in life into adulthood. And
yeah, it's interesting. When you were growing up in the late 70s and 80s, like was there like a Korean town in LA? Like was there like Little Armenia and all these little pockets of different people from different parts of the world, or was it a little bit more simple back then?
No, I feel like it was always. I feel like it was like that more than now, because people mix a lot more now than they did when I was a kid. So.
Right. So, I mean, that bodes well for the future, hopefully, right? It's just where we don't even, see race or color or ethnicity or religion, right? We can all just kind of get along.
I mean, the get along part, yeah. I feel like that's the thing. One thing is that we don't need to not be able to see it in order to get along.
Great.
And I think that's one of the problems we have in society, is that forcing our lenses on each other, or the thought that I have to agree with you to respect you. I don't have to agree with you to respect you. I can have full respect for you and acknowledge that you're different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's perfectly fine. I don't have to pretend like you're not of another culture, that you don't. I don't have to pretend like I don't see this stuff. I could just respect it.
Yeah, I love that. I lived in China for 18 years, so I was different.
Right.
And everyone looked at me like I was crazy. And everyone looked at me like, oh my God, this guy's still living there. Like, and I struggled with the language and I struggled with the culture. And eventually, it did become familiar and comfortable. But but also too, like I was inside the China bubble and I was listening to what people were saying from outside the China bubble and all the stereotypes that people were putting on Chinese people.
Right.
And even though I'm a big white guy, I still kind of associated myself as living in Shanghai and dealing with Chinese problems, like, because I was living in the same city with all of them, right? So I had to, like, become assimilated to their way of living in order just to get around. And it was easier because the society there became more Western over time while I was there. But it was still a wild ride. So I can imagine, you going from, a neighborhood you grew up into a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, right, and feeling a little out of place.
Right. Well, that was the thing. I was so young, I didn't feel out of place. I mean,
kids are just kids, right? They're just innocent.
Yeah, you're a kid, and you expect for it to be different, because you're constantly, well, for me, I was constantly going into spaces that were different. So it being different wasn't shocking for me. And quite honestly, like my neighbors being all Hispanic family would welcome me in. I would play with the kids and they would feed me just as if I was them. So I didn't feel any difference, yeah.
So when did you realize you had a passion for the arts? Because this about you is quite amazing. Like, to find a multidisciplinary artist like yourself who does so many different things. I mean, you can name them off, but it's amazing. Like, when did you know that you had that bug? For me, just as an aside, I was so busy playing sports as a kid. I played basketball predominantly,
right,
and I didn't have like any other pastimes or any other interests until I quit basketball. And then all of a sudden I had like a whole new palette of interests that just like appeared out of nowhere because my sports career was completely suppressing every other desire to explore anything else, right? Because you're practicing like 3-4 hours a day for 14 years, that's life. But coming out of that, it was just like everything was, bright and everything tasted different. Like it was like a whole new experience. I was just wondering for you, like when you jumped into the art world.
I was born in it.
You were born in it.
Yeah, from a small kid, I was always drawing. And I think, your surroundings kind of define you. They tell you what you are.
Yeah.
So I feel like as I experimented with the drawing, the elders would say, "Oh, you're an artist," and then you own that.
Yeah.
And I even see it with my own kids, like they do the same thing. Like the people around say you're an artist, and then they begin to say I'm an artist.
Yeah. That's how you identify yourself,
right? And so because the world is labeled when we're born into it, so they tell us a car is a car and the store is the store. So I'm an artist. Like,
right.
So yeah, I think I was kind of just born into having that identity. And being home alone a lot. Like, what else are you gonna do?
Were you an only child?
Yeah, I was the only child. And so yeah, I think just being creative in general, taking things apart that I wasn't supposed to take apart, like. Just adventure is what led me into
that space. So I mean, what was it first? For you, was it first like comic books? Like, what was the first kind of like graphic artwork that you started to see that started to shape your idea of like maybe what you wanted to draw or what you wanted to put into the world?
Right. It's funny. The first thing I could remember drawing was like Lowriders.
You just told me your memory was amazing, so I'm holding you to a high bar, right?
Yeah, my cousin would have Lowrider magazines.
Okay.
And I believe I saw him sketching a Lowrider magazine, and so then I started drawing the car. And then it was fun, but that had to be like 5 or 6 years old.
When I was that age, I was sketching comic books. So I also I don't consider myself to be an artist or a visual artist or being able to draw or paint or anything like that. But I remember being 5 or 6 and sketching comic book covers like Punisher, Superman, X-Men, exactly, like Wolverine. Like I would have all these and I would trace them because I wasn't talented enough to, and I was hoping that somehow maybe I would figure it out if I traced enough covers, I would be able to draw them someday. But then I got caught up in sports and that was done. But
yeah, I had a comic book phase. Middle school, middle school's comic book phase. But
Yeah.
even before that, I was lowrider cars.
Lowrider cars. That's epic. I think lowrider cars is something so specific to this part of the world that we're currently living in, because it just doesn't exist anywhere else.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Having a car that doesn't really work and bouncing all over the place is not something the Koreans or the Japanese really want.
Right.
It's something really specific to here.
Well, lowriders work.
Yeah. And they're cool. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
Yeah. So growing up young, drawing, sketching, lowrider magazines, comic books, when did you decide, like, wow, I want to make a mural someday?
Well, I mean, I'm heavy into hip hop. Even the movie Beat Street. Remember seeing that movie and the character Ramo doing the murals, and I don't know, I've just the aesthetics of it all I was drawn to, and being a hip hop kid, and then going to high school at Fairfax High School is right there on Melrose, and in the alley there's a graffiti crew called CBS with amazing murals, and I would just sit there in the alley after school and watch guys like paint and do murals, and
it just jumped at you.
Yeah. And my mom let me she let me paint in the house. So
that's very generous of her. Wow, not bad.
I had a subway train running down the hallway, and she would just come home and she see it, and she was, oh, that's great. So my mom was real supportive in that sense. And I think it was because she didn't want me out in the streets, so she figured if she let me do it in the house, then I don't have to go out.
That's a great, that's smart. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Wow. Did you play any sports when you were young?
Yeah.
What'd you get into?
Baseball. I played football in high school. Football kind of took over for a while. But yeah.
So we're like the same age. So who are your heroes? Because like I grew up loving and watching like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, right? Late 70s, early 80s. And then obviously Michael and Scotty, and then of course like Isaiah Thomas was, and the Pistons and the Bulls. Like I grew up in like all this, and I was just, in Canada even, we didn't even have an NBA team, but we were so entrenched with it. It was epic.
Toronto didn't have a team at first, right?
No, I think we got a team in like '97. Remember Damon Stoudemire? He was our first draft pick that we got, like number one draft pick, Damon Stoudemire, Toronto Raptors. I think it was like 97.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was at the first game actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my family, we all went. It was a big deal, I remember.
Right. Yeah, I was a Lakers kid. Lakers through.
Yeah. What was it like growing up as a Lakers fan in LA during like the heyday of the 80s?
Amazing, right? Because we had, the Lakers were everything. Magic Johnson, Michael Cooper, so
James
Worthy. Exactly.
Love James Worthy.
And so that was amazing. Even Michael Cooper came to my elementary school and spoke at the school, and that was amazing to have like a pro athlete that you watch on TV come to the school.
Yeah. Did they do a lot of outreach back in the day, or do they still do? I mean, now there's just there's such superstars, right? Like it's amazing. But like 30 years ago, someone like Michael Cooper, 2-guard, right, or 3-guard,
right,
or a 3 small forward. I think he could easily just walk into a school and no one would really bother him.
No, we knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not that deep into it to where I know like what they're doing now and stuff like that, but it was definitely a big deal in like the Lakers parades and stuff like that.
Yeah. I watched I was in Vegas a couple months ago, and I watched the mid-season tournament where the Lakers won, and they did the whole mid-season tournament in Vegas, and it was actually like, it was a pretty good show. Like got to watch LeBron and the team put together a really good what did we watch, like 3 games. It was really nice.
Oh, right. Right. Yeah, that's basketball these days. It's not quite the same as when it was.
No, the 3-point line has changed the game significantly. Yeah, but you said you played high school football.
Yeah.
And which position did you play?
Receiver and cornerback.
Yeah. And did LA have a professional team at that stage? Anyone for you to like look up to?
Yeah, we had. That's I think I'm just the nomadic living. I feel like I've just become that in every aspect of my life. So I'm like how you said you practice just basketball. 14 years is all you did. I've never done that with anything, whether it be sports or art, writing. I feel like I'm a dabbler.
Yeah.
I just move around, so I don't get that deep into it. But yeah, we had the Rams, we had the Raiders. It was Raider Nation back then.
That's right. I remember the Raiders jackets. Yeah. I think I had one actually.
Yeah, the Raiders were everything. But then Raiders and the Rams left at the same time, and we were without a team for a while.
Yeah. And the Rams are back now, right?
Yeah, Rams are back now. Chargers are here.
Yeah. You're getting some good coverage then, sports-wise.
Yeah.
So when did you kind of move on from a sporting career and decide to take up, like, I guess a job or a career as an artist? Like, what was the first thing you wanted to do?
Well, that's the weird thing. The first thing I wanted to do, I wanted to be an architect, and I wanted to be a cartoonist. But at that time, I was in junior high school, and I found out cartoonist, you had to draw the same thing over and over and over. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to draw the same thing over and over.
That dates us though, because nowadays they've got like animation computers and stuff like that. But you remember, yeah.
And that's why I told my wife, I was like, it's crazy how I had this like kind of a dream as a small kid, let it go, went, lived life, did all this other stuff, and now here I am back again doing animation on my computer. It's kind of crazy.
It's like a full circle story, right? Like where you start doing something as a kid and then you move on and leave it, and then you can come back to it, and that skill never leaves, right? Like It's like riding a bicycle. Like you still have that passion, you still have the visions, you can still make the drawings, you can still produce.
And now I have the discipline and patience that I didn't have as a kid.
Yeah.
I can see it through.
I feel like my discipline and patience has gone in the opposite direction since I was a kid. Yeah.
I'm gaining it, and I love that but yeah, like, and then I caught the rap bug, and that took over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a huge bug. I mean, the whole world woke up to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I began to learn that I could have a voice. So it wasn't just about making songs for the club for people to dance to, but it kind of played into like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, like being able to speak directly to the people where they would be in a church or a mosque, speaking to the people. I could do it in the local booth.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just me being a thinker and a person that tries to come up with solutions for a lot of different things, I found that I could put it in music. And there's the joy of the craft and being a lyricist and wordplay, and hip-hop is fun, and at the same time it can be meaningful. So
I know. So did your high school have like a recording studio, or were you able to do anything like that like at school?
Free those days.
Yeah. No, I don't think my high school definitely didn't have any kind of studio space or anything like that.
Right. No.
But I mean, like, you're young, you're like, late teens, and you're kind of, I guess that's the whole start of, what Dr. Dre and all these like pioneers did, Ice Cube, and like the way they just kind of brought this whole movement to the rest of the world.
Oh,
what was it, like 88, 80, 89, 90 was Straight Outta Compton and all this stuff. Like that was when I first caught it. But I mean, I guess here in LA things were happening even earlier.
Hip hop's been around since the 70s, but
yeah,
definitely. For me, I would say personally, I didn't have a space like that. We were just kids. We would use our tape decks and beatbox in one and record the beatbox and then rap to that. You had to be very creative at that time.
Sure.
It wasn't until like 1920 that I was able to even get to a studio. So it's very different than what the youth have today.
Right.
And honestly, I became an artist who put together like after school programs and stuff like that, and go to the high school and work with the youth and writing workshops and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So when did you decide that you wanted to be an artist that would share, that art with the community, or share that art with other students and help like inspire youth to follow, in artistic footsteps instead of something else? Like when did you kind of make that switch?
In 2000.
Yeah.
And that is because there was a elder poet, El Rivera. I moved from rapping kind of into the spoken word world just because hip hop was changing from being a voice where you can have positivity. Like it moved from the days of Tribe Called Quest and Public Enemy and stuff like that, and was moving more into like Snoop Dogg and Victorious Big, and you know that's cool for different people, but my voice didn't align with where hip hop was moving to, and the spoken word world was more accepting of just consciousness. And in the spoken word scene, I met El Rivera, and she had already been doing a project she called Mentorship 2000, where she would go into the juvenile halls and do workshops with the youth in the juvenile hall. It's kind of like a group counseling type thing.
Okay.
And poets that she liked, she would invite to come with her to the juvenile halls. So, of course, with her to the juvenile hall, and it was just eye-opening. For one, the youth were the same type of kids that I grew up with and were like relatives of mine, except they were in a bad space, and it was my opportunity to try to give them whatever words of wisdom I could have at that age, and try to help steer their lives in a different direction. And I caught that bug really bad. That's what moved me into social work and everything.
That's intense. So juvenile hall is a place where people under the age of 18 go if they've committed a crime because they don't kid jail. Exactly. Yeah. And what was it like? You know, you said like 2000, so you would have been like 24. Like, what was it like kind of going in there, talking to 16, 17-year-olds when you were, you know, just a few years older, but had somehow like steered clear of the problems that they'd gotten into? Did you just feel lucky, or did you feel some responsibility? Like, I always just feel lucky, like, because we don't really, you can't pick your parents, right? And you can't pick where you're from. So, you know, if you've got parents that show you some respect and encourage you along the way, you're way ahead of most kids, right? And of course, like, sometimes when I meet, you know, when I'm traveling around the world, or I meet people that are you know, weren't born in advantageous situation, you know, you want to help them, you want to encourage them, you want to give them hope, but at the same time, you also feel a little lucky, like, you know, you could have easily just been drawn in a different hand, right, in life. And it's it's just terrifying that happens without any of knowledge or planning. You just show up in the world, and this is your family, this is where you live. It's wild. And then to live through life like that without being able to have any say in it it's intense.
I don't feel like in many ways my life had been similar to a lot of the youth that I was talking to. You know, I chose different things in different situations, and like I also said, my early years in elementary school, I feel like I was fortunate that I began to go to middle school and high school in a completely different space, because it jarred me and told me that I needed to go in a different direction than the path that I was on.
That's interesting. So can I just take a step back? Like, so who was it, your mother or another family member that kind of pushed you to change schools and to get into a better neighborhood where you would have better opportunities? Or you were like 8, right? Like, you didn't just make that decision yourself?
I was in the 7th grade, like, so I had to be like 10, 11, I think, off top. But it was just my mom started dating the guy whose son went to middle school at this other school.
It was that random.
It was really random, right?
Yeah.
Even to where I still was living on the east side, but he was using someone else's address, and so we used someone else's address to where I was able to go to the different schools. So yeah.
And these were better schools. They were better funded. They were safer. They were so how is that like night and day separation between kind of where you grew up and where you ended up going to school?
It's wild because my 7th grade year, my first year of middle school, I saw that the kids were different. Saw that the space was different.
What was that difference though? Like, was it just? I mean, like, what was that? What's the initial difference? Was it like people were more hopeful, people were more respectful, more educated? Like, what was the thing that hit you?
First of all, it was the first time I'd ever been around like Jewish kids, Asian kids, Filipino kids. Honestly, in elementary school, I probably didn't even know it was a difference between like Korean and Chinese or Filipino,
Right.
So stereotypes were heavy,
That's a great way to describe childhood in general, right? Yeah.
Right. You're in a bubble, and my bubble was predominantly Black and some Hispanic. So that was all I knew at that time. So coming into middle school, it was really eye-opening in that sense. But even African-American kids weren't, the hostility, it wasn't as much hostility on the west side as it was on the east side. So on the east side, I was used to playing basketball. Somebody calls a foul or something, it's likely, you can end up physical fighting, through just playing basketball.
Right.
On the west side, same scenario happens and you're riled up like you're about to fight. And they're like, man, like, are you tripping? Why are you acting crazy?
Yeah. It's just a game. It's just a game. Relax. Relax. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, my personal experience, that was a big difference. And you have gangs on the west side too, but it's nothing like on the east side. So that was a drastic difference for me.
Yeah.
Which I think I was fortunate to have, whereas a lot of kids that I'm seeing in the juvenile halls don't have that experience. They just stay in the bubble,
Which was the east side.
Right. And not to say that all of the kids are from the east side. I'm just speaking from my personal experience. And it was eye-opening because once I got to the 8th grade, my second year of middle school, my best friend from my elementary school just so happened to check into the middle school. And I was excited to see him, like, wow, like whoever would have thought,
Yeah.
But he was super thug. So we got to the 8th grade. And he was telling me wild stories of friends that we had. And this was just like a 2-year difference from 6th grade to 8th grade. And I just wasn't that kid anymore to where I could even really identify with him that much. So
he had some stories that just kind of blew your mind about where him and other kids you grew up with were doing.
Yeah, that just seemed real grown, real. Just it was a different world. And in middle school we were more associates than friends in middle school, just because our paths went 2 completely different directions.
Sounds like he grew up really quick. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what happens on the east side.
That's not easy at all. But it sounds like, your middle school and high school really changed your perspective on, what you could be and what you could give to the world, right? Especially through your art.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have that experience.
Yeah.
So when did you start getting involved with the juvenile hall stuff? You mentioned this poet had brought you in to do some work with them, but obviously you've continued that. Like, when did you decide to continue it on your own, and what kind of involvement do you have today?
Well, from working with El Rivera, and then I met Layla Steinberg. She used to manage Tupac like early in his career. And she was doing the same thing. She was going to the juvenile halls and stuff like that. So I began to work with her a lot, and it just seemed like it kind of just taking my identity. And like now I'm an artist that's in the community and giving back. And then a friend of mine, her mom is an attorney for Children's Law Center, which is their law firms that work for foster youth in Southern California. So they function as the attorneys for the foster youth. And she thought that I would do well there as a social work investigator because they needed people who could connect with the youth because the youth, they don't always open up to everyone. Even though I didn't have a background in social work, and most people work there, have college degrees and stuff like this, but she saw the work that I was doing. And at the time, I wanted to open a youth center, and I was just really involved in the community. So I was fortunate enough to get hired there and worked there for 15 years. So
Oh, wow.
from there,
Amazing.
even at first I was just a social work investigator, which that's it's only kind of function as a social worker, so we don't go out as often as the county workers do. But then we developed a program to help the foster youth who are the clients for the law firm, to help those that have probation cases also, because a lot of foster youth, when they get a probation case, it's a lot worse than when the average kid that's not a foster youth gets a probation case, because they don't have family support.
They can spiral a lot faster.
Right.
Yeah.
When a judge looks out and it's the biological parents that the youth is living with, then the judge figures, okay, mom and dad, you can help with this, that, and the third. But for foster youth, bouncing from group home to group home, they don't have that same support system. So we actually developed a unit called the Care Unit, which we began to be advocates for the youth, and honestly, in my role, functioning like mentors for the youth, working for their attorney. So I would go out to like their court dates. I would go visit them at the juvenile hall or group homes, wherever they are, and I would be in contact with them weekly, and even helping them develop programs to try to turn things around, which for me, that was my passion, right? Like that was the dream situation. So yeah.
When we were working in these youth programs, like, how hard is it to be result oriented? Like, how hard is it to like I've never worked in the community or worked with youth, troubled youth or anything like this. So like, when you approach kids like this, when you're working with kids like this, like, do you come at it in a result oriented kind of way where it's like, I'm going to help this person, I'm going to change this person? Or is it like more, you're just trying to offer your time and offer support and relying on them to make the changes that they need to make in their own time, and not on your time scale? Because I would find that would be like probably one of the biggest conflict points, is you knowing what changes they need to make and them, either, accepting your advice or dragging their feet and wanting to do their own thing, and how frustrating that could be, like watching someone continue to, hurt their chances later in life to live a decent life.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's kind of in the middle, right? Because unfortunately, they don't have the luxury to go by their time. And, when it's the difference between a dream and a goal, right? Like, if you just have a dream to get somewhere, you're never going to get there, because you need to make it a goal. And
like by adding steps, like you got to do this, you got to do that.
Like a goal is it? Yeah. You make steps to reach a goal. Like you can define a goal. Like, all right, my goal is to climb the mountain. So how long is it going to take me? I'm going to plan that out. But if it's just my dream is to climb a mountain, there's no plan to get there.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people in society, they just have a dream to live a better life, but they never make it a goal to have a better life.
So they never map out like what it's going to take for them to get from A to B.
Right.
Yeah, they just dream of living, in Bel Air or something like that, or without ever having an idea of how to make it work.
Right.
And I only chose Bel Air as an example because of the Fresh Prince of Bel Air, which you and I both grew up watching. Don't even try to lie to me.
And so for the youth, oftentimes they don't have a time schedule, because it's not even a goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you ask them what they can dream to be an NBA player, but they're kicking it in front of the liquor store. They don't go to school, and they getting high and gangbanging. Like, it's a dream. It's like, cool. It's a dream. But so to answer your question, for me, the judge has given them a date, that this needs to be done by, or you're going back into the halls, or you going to camp, or so they don't have the luxury to drag their feet. but then at the same time, you have to meet people where they are, right? And my whole thing is you can't force anyone to change. So for me,
That's the truth. Boy, we learn that as we grow up, don't we? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So for me, it was about finding intrinsic motivation. So, for instance, like the scenario of going out and asking a kid, like, what does he want to become when he becomes grown? He says he wants to be an NFL player. He wants to play football.
Yeah.
A lot of social workers would be like, I mean, gang banging and getting out. Like they're like, well, you need to find something more practical. Like that's a 1 in a million chance, and they just kind of beat up on his dream instead of helping him make it a goal. So for me, that's intrinsic motivation. Like, okay, you want to play in the NFL, the first thing I do is probably crack a joke like, oh, so you got game? Like, have you ever played before? Like, are you fast? Or and just kind of feed into that and get them going. Like the competitive part of them is like, yeah, I'm fast, or I'm better than so-and-so. I might bring a football out the next time and play catch with them. And my thing is, okay, so if you want to play in the NFL, they scout from colleges, so you got to get to college in order to get to the NFL. And even if your grades aren't that good, there's pros who went to like a junior college first and then went to a university and got picked up from an NFL team. So first thing you got to do is get you straight in high school. Like you need to play at the high school if you really want to go there.
And that means attending high school. And that means, behaving and playing within the parameters of whatever the high school says, right? And that's tough.
Can we even make it a goal to straighten out your grades to be eligible enough to play football?
I love this, because so many people will tell you right away what they want in life. And the amount of people who dismiss that and then tell them, oh, well, let's find something a little bit more manageable. But the moment you say that, that person you're talking to who has that dream has already clicked out. They're gone. Yeah. I remember telling people like I wanted to make TV and stuff like that back in the day, and they were just like, "Nah, like come on, like what do you really want to do?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to make TV." But and then the moment the conversation goes anywhere away from like me wanting to make TV, I've already I've already dismissed that person, right? It's like you don't want to help me find my goals. Fuck, I'll find someone else who wants to help me find my goals. Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is, it takes a strong mind to do what you did. Like a lot of people, we just get beat up about it so much that we kind of let it go.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with a lot of parenting and being in sports programs, from a young age, and having parents, drive you to practice, and growing up in that kind of, there was a lot of support for athletic pursuits, right? And of course, with athletic pursuits come discipline, listening to your elders, respecting coaches, and then that translates. And then of course, if you start fucking up your grades, you're off the team.
Right.
So everything for me was built around, performing in athletics.
Right.
And that's how I kept my shit straight.
Which is great, right? Because intrinsic motivation, you love basketball, you want to play basketball.
Yeah.
So I work with that. I work with whatever the youth gives me. So it's kind of meeting the middle, right? So what I would do when I went out with the youth is I would look at the terms of probation. And oftentimes when they're sitting in a courtroom, the judge is saying what the terms are, but the youth isn't listening. That there's so much going in there. The head is in a whirlwind. It's like, all right, I got to listen. I got to go to school. They don't really understand what it is. So
would these be for violent crime, like fighting or gun violence, or would this be for drugs or for, what kinds of things are you seeing? Yeah.
Yes. All of the above, like whatever's against the law and they get caught for, so some is small and some is pretty big.
Because I always, I tell people I've grown up internationally, right? And, I left North America, I left Canada when I was 22. So I was still a kid, but you are already mentoring kids at 22, 23. So you started giving back really young, but I lived in China for 18 years, and then I lived in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai for about 4 years.
Wow.
And in these two countries, I would say these are probably two of the safest countries in the world. There's no guns. Drugs are severely illegal. So I think in these two countries, people are actually afraid of the state. afraid of the police, afraid of the government apparatus, not necessarily in a bad way, but in a way which makes them not want to like break the law. And then, of course, here you come back to the United States and you see all this violence, and you see all these, young people who don't have support when they're young, who grow up, relying on other kids, for the, and then of course get into gang violence and stuff like that because they don't have parents, who are there to help them along the way, or to ship them to another part of town, like you, did. And I always find like that the difference between the kind of violence you see in the United States at a children's level is completely far-fetched, and even people living in other parts of the world wouldn't even be able to dream about some of the stuff that goes on here, just because of how tight the government holds power over people and their decisions and criminal activity.
Which is interesting because I think, in America too, like even outside of like committing crimes and stuff like that, we look down on that much control. Like the government have like your android and the robot, and you don't have any personal freedom.
Yeah. Like the Matrix, like we're just all plugged in.
Right.
Yeah.
So that in the individualism in us as Americans, it doesn't work with that.
No.
So
it's so amazing because you don't have a very oppressive political system here. You have tons of freedoms. You have a freedom to bear arms. You have freedom to speak your mind. Religious association, all of these things. But then at the same time, it's like that. I feel like those freedoms accelerate entrepreneurial activity, capitalism, art. People finding their voice, people expressing themselves, but then the downside of that is just massive criminal violence everywhere.
Byproduct. Right. I mean, that's life, right? There's always pros and cons to everything.
No, it's the American way of life. So I mean, you grew up, you grew up in L.A. You got caught up in hip hop when it started to get popular. You were a lyricist. How have you, what are you working on these days in the art world? Like, what have you been putting together in the last little while that, people could find and learn more about you?
Definitely doing music. I'm honestly now taking music more seriously. So like I said, just learning to be more disciplined in the consistency of it, rather than writing the book and then leaving that and making a cartoon and leaving that and making music. I found a way to kind of bring things all together. So right now I'm releasing a lot of music. I just released a EP last month, which is available on my website, which is GaKnew.com, GaKnew.com.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was an interesting thing, is because I had to figure out how to sell music now in a current age where it's like supply and demand, right? But there's so much supply. Like music is for free pretty much on Spotify
everywhere. Yeah,
so,
it's crazy.
And so with that, there's no respect for it either. When people have easy access to stuff, they just don't respect it. Whereas if they don't have easy access, they respect it more. And
it's hard kind of wrapping your head around the customer psychology when you're an artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, I've been a writer and a photographer over the years as well, before I made TV, and I was always doing pictures and doing exhibitions for my photography work and stuff like that. And understanding understanding the monetary value of what someone sees in something you've created is incredibly challenging. And you don't know if it's $5.99 for an EP or $14.99 for an EP or $1,000, for a black and white print that's been framed in a gallery or something like that. Like understanding like where your potential client base is and or customer base is and what they'll pay, for you to keep creating is a shocker.
And that's yeah. And I think that's the thing, is like it's not even so much about the money that it generates. It's more about like the money is a resource for you to continue to generate the art, right? Like I can't keep making music if I have to pay bills and the music is not paying me in order for me to pay bills. Then I gotta stop doing the art to go do something else. And so for me, my art, especially my music or poetry, is more about conversations with the public, like meaningful conversations, and hopefully coming up to some of the some solutions to the woes that we have in this country, in my community. Definitely, I feel like what drives me is the same thing that drove me to work with the youth in the juvenile hall. It's rather than me doing it in a cell in the juvenile hall, I'm doing it in my music so I can reach more people. But if I can't sell it, then I can't continue to do it because I can't afford to, like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, it's really, I mean, people do it, but it's really hard to work 10, 14, 16 hours a day and then come home and write, beautiful lyrics, right? Like, cause you're melted, you're exhausted. Being an artist is a lifestyle. And sometimes you can sit around, biting the end of your pen for 4 hours before something comes to you. And then all of a sudden you're in it, right? Like you can't necessarily always force it to happen between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. between a job and, an event or something.
Even if you could, like, you still have to pay for it to be out there. Like, even as after work, I came home and wrote and created and everything. In order to get people to hear it, you got to pay for ads. You have to pay for all types of things, and even the freedom to be able to tour. Part of touring is so you can reach more ears, but you can't tour when you have a 9 to 5. Like, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So what's your experience been like, living as an artist and making a living off of your words, your vision, your art?
New to it.
You're new to it. It's a strange life. I've been doing it for like 25 years. Yeah, it's a wild ride.
I'm so used to my check is going to be there Friday. Like, you working in the foster care and juvenile justice system, you work, you get paid. So it's just been the last year and a half that I've been doing art full time. And thankfully, me doing animation and I get paid to do animation, that helps a lot. But yeah, the whole gig thing and selling art is I'm still getting used to it.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the hardest thing is just not knowing, like, when the next paycheck is going to come through, right? Because you need to budget, monthly for costs. You've got rent, you've got food, gas, parking, all this stuff, and then you know what it costs you to live every month, and then the further that month goes before that next check comes or before you lock in that next gig or whatever. It's a gig economy, man, and it's nasty out there. Yeah. It's I have this saying. I'm curious to see if you agree with me. I have a saying that, like, COVID killed freelancing. So, like, a lot of artists are freelancers. They're writers, they're photographers, they're musicians. They don't get a stable paycheck. They're bouncing around doing their art, and I like to tell people, like, in my eyes, because I worked with all these people and I was one of these people, and I also hired these people to help me. Like, sometimes I would make a TV show and I would need a still photographer. I would hire a still photographer, or I would need camera operators that could use video cameras, or an audio person who could make some theme song music for one of my shows, right? All these people are freelancers. All these people are artists in their own right. And I always have this thing, like, COVID completely killed off this generation of, like, freelance artists, because for 3 years there, nothing was really going on unless you were making art at home by yourself. Because to be able to work or travel or communicate or tour or do live performance, like, all of this was just completely closed off. And then people had to get real jobs, like 9 to 5 jobs. And then, of course, their art completely suffered. And I know some incredibly talented cinematographers, camera operators that are now working, as website designers or in marketing agencies, not using even any of their incredibly God-given skills. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
That's wild. COVID birthed me as an animator.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To walk me through that.
Yeah, I was just working in social work before then, and then 2020, a producer that I knew, well, I did that. My first animation was for a song of mine, just to put on YouTube. I like to draw, and the video idea that I had was too far-fetched, so I can't do it live. So I'll animate it.
Right.
So she saw the animation, was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know like you know, that you draw and you do animation. Like, I have this project."
And you got to bark back at her and be like, "I'm multidisciplinary, man. I'm everything."
Most people didn't know that I paint or anything. They just knew me as a poet or as a rapper. And so I didn't know how to do what she wanted me to do at the time. But I'll find out. Like, so I was like,
never say no to work. As an artist and a freelance, you will figure that out. Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
So which is the new single I just released. But so yeah, I went on YouTube, I figured out how to do it, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do this project. And I didn't know that world at all, so I didn't know the pay structure or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she paid me, it was good, and then she's like, okay, I have this other thing. And then all of a sudden, it was just like month after month, it was this thing and this thing and this thing. And so I found myself in the middle of the night just doing animation for like 6 months after work.
Oh, wow. That's incredible that you're able to jump into that.
2020, brought me into animation.
From your early days of being a muralist and an artist, for writing and drawing, and then when you were a muralist, did you use spray paint or were you using spray paint? Yeah, I've met a lot of muralists that use spray paint artists or whatever. They're some very, very cool people. So my question: how did you transfer those artistic skills into animation, which isn't about using your hands or using a can? It's more about using a keyboard or a mouse. Like that. Was that a different?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like I've learned the hard way with a lot of things, because
that only means you remember.
Because even before I knew what a Wacom pen was, which is the
what? A
Wacom pen. So that's the pen that we use now for the tablet to be able to draw onto the computer. For the longest time, I didn't know that exists. So
I still don't know that exists. So so there's a tablet, and you draw on it.
Yeah, I have a pen in my pocket. So this is the pen that I use to draw on a computer. Okay. So there's a tablet that comes with it.
Amazing.
So before I knew that this exists, I would just use my mouse to draw on a computer.
Yeah.
And then someone asked me to do so, I was like, dude, you just did that with a mouse? Like, are you crazy? Like, like
it took 20 hours for you to do that instead of one. Yeah.
And so I forgot what the question was, but
no, just transferring your muralist skills onto the keyboard. Yeah.
So I was drawing with a pencil and pad before I picked up a spray paint can. So, it's just going back to pen and pad. I think the weird thing about using the pen for the computer is that you're looking at the screen and drawing with the pen like down.
Right.
know? So the hand-eye coordination, it took about a week to get used to that.
Yeah, because I never thought of that. Because like when you're drawing, you're looking and you're drawing
and what you're drawing.
But then when you're drawing on this little pad, it doesn't stay on the pad. It only shows up on the screen. So your eyes are completely connected.
And now they have better pads now, or the pros use, where it's a huge screen. It's like a huge iPad, and it's back to like looking at it and drawing. But just for working at home and stuff, I still use just my original Wacom tablet.
Cool. So when you were doing outreach in Juvenile Hall and stuff like that, you were going there as an artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were going there as a writer, a poet, a rapper, a muralist. Like, were you trying to just comfort these youth, or were you trying to get them into art? And were you trying to share your passion for art with them, or teaching them how to get involved in artistic pursuits as well?
I was listening.
Just that's it. Just listening.
Yeah, my purpose was to listen, and just have conversation, and wherever the conversation leads, if I can have any words of wisdom in the process, then that's great. Generally, I usually ask if they want advice or if they, because sometimes people just need to vent and they don't need you to tell them what they need to do. They just
That's very true. Yeah.
And so I'm very conscious of that. If I do have a thought, then I'll ask them, like, do you want to hear something, or just a thought? And if I can share that, then and I'll share stories with them if I went through something similar, and just try to connect with them and build rapport. You have to build rapport first. Like, before you can help someone, you have to build trust with them.
Sure.
So
yeah, that's the hardest part, right? Those first few steps where you're not even trying to help anyone. You're just trying to make sure that people know you're, a stand-up guy.
Yeah, and I think that's the rough part of our systems, is that I guess, like, people kind of hear that in theory, but I often see it not being applied to where, a lot of workers, a lot of social workers, they just go in and they know what's right and what you need to do, and they just come to give it to you.
Yeah.
And it's not really, they don't build rapport.
Well, no, I mean, because no one's going to accept whatever you're saying if you try to stuff it down someone's throat, right? Like, you got to start small. I think it's very interesting, but your path through art and then through social work, like, artists are patient because shit moves slowly. Like, from brain to hand or from brain to mouth, like, we think about stuff so much before it actually goes out to the world, right? And I feel like with social work and trying to build rapport and build respect in these communities or with these individual kids, like, you need to go slow and really, like, let people know who you are and tell them stories about, like, your life, and so that they have some idea, like, you're a decent guy, and you're there to help and you're there to listen.
Right.
And I think, like, artists, I think are perfectly positioned to be patient enough to do this work, because like you said, social workers, they just want to, like, maybe I'm just speculating, but they have a lot of things to do every day, and then they have to go and leave, or they have multiple, and maybe they're just in a rush all the time because they're overworked and underpaid, whereas an artist can come in and take a different approach on a different timeline.
Yeah. And sometimes workers don't come from the same space as the youth, so there's the wow factor. And there's the
how much of a disconnect is that, like, coming from a different, like, a social worker coming from a radically different background than someone in juvenile hall? Like, it must be tough to bridge that gap, because then you have this barrier where it's like, oh, you don't know where I came from, you don't know what I've seen, you don't know how I grew up, like, stop giving me advice.
From my view and my reflection on the past 15 years, it's massive, and it's not even just like the kid saying, you can't, like, you don't know my life, so you can't tell me. But oftentimes what I see and what I've begun to notice is that people don't know what is part of the person's culture, or that it's just unhealthy. So, for example, like, there's the ratio, what am I trying to say? Disproportionality. African American youth are disproportionately represented in the systems, and whether it be the foster care system, juvenile justice system, than in comparison to just regular society. So it's like 14% African Americans in LA, but then 30% youth in foster care or something like that. I'm just kind of like throwing the numbers out there. It's been a while since I looked at those numbers.
Sure.
But
I think we can all agree that you're spot on. It's just, what are the exact percentages?
Right. Yeah. So with the workers, the thought is that the social workers don't understand that some of the ways that the youth may talk to each other or engage, or what we may perceive as being aggressive and violent or toxic, for lack of better words, is just a product of their environment and their culture. And so, like, there's this huge gray area for people who aren't from the African American community, that they don't know the difference between what is like Black culture and what is unhealthy behavior, and they get policed for trying to identify the difference, you know. And so for a lot of workers that aren't from that space, they don't know the difference between if it's something that is not acceptable or something that should be accepted as part of culture.
Right, because you're not going to change someone's culture. Like, that's so heavily ingrained in people, right? How they grew up, the way they talk to people, the way they treat people. Like, for the most part, like if you're talking to like an 18-year-old young man, he or she, like the way that they, you know, communicate with each other, especially, is probably not going to change based on a counselor telling them, hey, you can't do that anymore.
Well, but culture is always evolving, right?
That's true. Constantly.
So it might not evolve just because I said so. Like you're like, you know, you're not going to change. Your paradigm's not going to shift just because I said this is. But when we begin to understand influence and how we're influenced, and there's a point in your life where you come into awareness and you get to decide, like you're no longer just a byproduct of your experiences, but you get to decide what you want your next experience to be. Like, you get to influence your environment to affect the way that your environment influences you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think coming into that awareness, like that's the hopes that you would like to bring to the youth, is that they become aware of, okay, at this point, everybody's been deciding where you live and you've had no say-so. But at some point, you get to have a say-so. Even in your actions, you're having a say-so. Because if you keep cutting up, you're having to say-so to end up in juvenile hall.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you get it together and do what you need to do, you're having to say-so to, okay, give me another opportunity. Like, help me get to a space that's healthier. But, you know, you have to come into that awareness.
So do you think that awareness of like physical mobility and getting out of a bad neighborhood or getting out of a routine that you've been connected with for years, like, do you think that's probably some of the main elements that need to change if a young person wants to get, you know, radically change their future? Because it's hard to move away from your friends. It's hard to move away from what you know, even if you know it's right. Like it's hard to reject everything you've grown up with, even though you know it's killing you in some way. You know what I mean? Like normality. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually have a new song that I'm releasing tomorrow called "The Hate Is Love." And with
the hate is love.
The hate is love.
I like that.
So
yeah,
like because there's this thing that we deal with especially in urban communities, is the haters, right? Like this thing of haters, like y'all hating on me. But oftentimes, like for the youth, if I'm coming in out and I'm telling them like, man, like you can't, I'm just trying to steer them on the right path. But for them, if they want to do the thing that's deemed wrong, I'm hating. Like I'm hating on what they want to do, and I'm just a hater. I'm not a hater. Like I'm trying to tell you what's best for you out of love for you,
and out of experience.
Yeah, out of experience, out of love, out of seeing something better for you. But you perceive my love to be hatred, and oftentimes, they end up with friends who just enjoy seeing people go through pain. Like they're the same kids that want to crowd around and see the fight and see somebody get the crap beat out of them, right? Or like instigate a fight just to get you to fight because they want the thrill of the fight. That's hatred. Like that's and you perceive that person to be somebody that loves you, right? Like that's your friend. You got love for that person. But really that person is instigating situations to get you caught up. Like that person is talking you into going into a store and robbing that store or hitting somebody randomly on a bus stop because they want to laugh and get a thrill out of it. That's hate, bro.
But you're picking up the tab with Juvenile Hall.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and then what are they going to do about that? So
They're not going to help you, that's for sure. So how are these your friends?
right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like twisted. Like you perceive the love as hate, and sometimes that hate is not really like that. What you're perceiving to be love, like that people got love for you, like they're encouraging you to do things that's not good for you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Love is the hate and hate is the love. Yeah, it's not easy to change hearts and minds, right?
Right.
Yeah. So in the last 15 years since you've been working with in Juvenile Hall and with young people in the way you have, like what's the biggest difference you've noticed in the last 15 years from their perspective? Like what are you seeing most in their personalities or in their frustrations with life? Like how have things changed in the last 15 years from their perspective?
Man, I think that's the thing that the impact that COVID had. Like since COVID, I don't know, things just seem more like violent to be. Things just have seemed to like ramp up.
Yeah, man, globally. Like, because I was in Ethiopia filming in the Simien Mountains in northern Ethiopia. Amazing country, wonderful people. And we were filming there, and that's when COVID hit for me, right? And then I was very lucky to get out of Ethiopia, but then I was in Istanbul, Turkey for 4 months, just hanging out by myself, basically. And I wasn't able to get back, to home or anything like that. I got stuck. And it just feels like since then, the world's just been insane. Like countries are doing insane things. Political leaders are doing insane things. People have lost their jobs and have been forced into all kinds of new levels of desperation, especially lower income workers. So, and of course, you've seen crime rise, you've seen prices rise, inflation. All of this is putting pressure on a part of the population that is already deemed vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, that's a wild study, and I feel like in 20 years we'll really see how the effects and the spikes.
Yeah, because I also think that the continuation of what we saw during COVID is even happening now in the United States. On an immigration front. Because I'm not an American citizen, I'm a visitor here, and because I don't vote, because I don't have the right to vote. I see things from a very global perspective.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. I don't have strong connections here. Yeah, you're like my fifth friend, and thank you. But it's funny, like, to have these conversations with Americans and figure out like where they see problems or where they see solutions or how they see like pressure has affected their lives or lives of other people around them since being locked down for 2 years, basically. Yeah. Like it's insane. Like what? Like, can you imagine, like, or maybe you can even tell me what life was like in a juvenile hall during COVID? I mean, it must have just been miserable.
Yeah.
To be stuck there.
Oh, that the kids were stuck there?
Well, yeah, because if they can't get out, I mean, you were stuck there. Like, it's for me, as someone who enjoys his personal freedom and his ability to travel, like, I looked at these people during COVID being stuck on cruise ships and not being able to get off a cruise ship because they couldn't dock anywhere because immigration wasn't letting people in, and then people were getting COVID on these cruise ships. Like, that's what I see jail being, or juvenile hall. Like, a whole bunch of people being stuck somewhere they don't necessarily want to be for longer than this. They're always stuck there. And then you've got this, this virus kind of running rampant through the whole. It's crazy.
Yeah. That was the crazy part. But the thing is, like, I mean, there's quarantining and stuff like that. I was considered an essential worker, so I didn't have completely the same experience that most of society had, because I was still going to work daily, and for me it kind of got a little better because I could work from home rather than having to go to the office to work. And I don't feel like I had the full experience of what it was like in the halls, just because, I get to leave, right? So if they're quarantining and I go to do the visit, then they just tell me I can't come in because they're quarantining. Sure. So I don't feel like I got the full what it really was. But when I stopped working for Children's Law Center for a year, I became a teacher just because the work with the foster youth and the youth in the juvenile justice system, it becomes emotionally taxing, like really. And with COVID like ramping up, I started having really just wild situations, like one youth calling me, telling me he just got stabbed with a machete, like just crazy stuff where it's just like, yeah, I can't do this work anymore.
So, like, walk me through that, though. Like, walk me through how emotionally taxing that is to, like, help other people and to work with other people at a level where you're building like real relationships with these kids. And that's got to be just scary, because if something happens to them, you're going to feel responsible, or you're going to feel like an emotional connection with them. And that, and then, you bring them into your life, and they have to accept you into theirs. And that connection is terrifying, because if something bad happens to them, or they don't get what you guys are working towards, like the emotional, you must feel really heavy.
Well, yeah, like after a while, in the beginning, it's like I'm from the community, so it wasn't hitting me as hard, like how they talk about compassion fatigue and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, I go home and I get it. I'm not new to the environment.
Yeah, you're able to switch it off.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I don't get disappointed if, the youth was doing good and all of a sudden they fell off and smoking weed and had a dirty test or something like that. I don't take it personal,
Yeah.
But once COVID happened and stuff started ramping up, first of all, the building rapport sometimes is like a blessing and a curse, because you suddenly build a rapport with them that they don't have with a lot of their other workers. So they begin to view you as their person. I even had a youth, he ended up, he and his girlfriend got pregnant, they had the baby. He was no longer on my caseload, so I hadn't talked to him in a few months. Attorney went to the baby's christening and said he named me as the godfather for the baby.
Oh, wow.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. And didn't even let you know?
Yeah, didn't tell me or anything. Like, and so, they heavy attachments begin to happen where you're like their person. That.
And these are kids that haven't had that at any point in their lives, probably, or at least from a male figure, probably.
Well, potentially. Yeah, it's up and every experience is different, but yeah, that's pretty frequent.
Yeah.
Like I've had cases where a kid was 13, his dad left him homeless, his mom died, and his dad left him homeless. Like, what do you do with that?
Jesus, I mean, like, animals are treated better than that.
So
that's
crazy. It's rough, right?
Yeah.
So how do you trust people? And then you begin to build a trust with a person, but unfortunately, they're a worker, So
they're not a family member who's going to care for you. Yeah.
So, after a while of having a lot of different attachments, and then wild stuff begins to happen to the youth. Like, I've known youth who've like had overdoses and died, and it's just a lot over the years. So I moved into teaching thinking that it would be less emotionally taxing, because we just view when you go into social work that it's going to be a lot like that comes with it.
Yeah.
When you become a teacher, you just don't have that perception, or I didn't have that perception, and so I became a teacher, and it was more.
Yeah. Well, because you're anything in this world that you spend time on, including people, you become emotionally invested, right? And then when things don't work out, or people disobey you, or they do the wrong thing, or you talk about going in the right path and they choose a different path, like that shit weighs heavily. I mean, I was and I can only say this, like I kind of have a bubble of friends around me, and I treat them the same way I treat my teammates, like I did back in the day. Like, we're all rooting for each other, we're all taking care of each other, we're all listening to each other if we have problems. And if one of them has an issue, like, I really feel heavy about it. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't imagine like enlarging my little bubble of my teammates, which is today maybe around 10 people or 15 people, to then, expanding that through work, mm-hmm. to having to care about 30 or 50, people who are at risk. who are waiting for me to come and, bring them some hope or bring them some attention or just listen to what they have to say, which is something that, is such a rarity probably for these kids in juvenile hall.
Right.
Like that responsibility would weigh heavy on me.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
kudos to you for doing the work. I mean, it's really not easy.
Yeah. It's not easy. And especially when so I was a career technical education. So I was there, but just as a art teacher. That was the way that I was able to work there because I don't have a degree to be a teacher.
Yeah. But all the kids would open up to you once you start doing art, right? Yeah. Yeah. They don't want to open up they don't want to open up to the counselors who have all the fancy degrees who can help them psychologically. Right. They want to open up to you because they see you as someone they can trust because you speak to them in a way that shows respect and you connect with them probably way better than an academic.
Yeah, but and that, like I said, a blessing and a curse, right? Because then they want to make you their buddy.
Yeah.
And they want to come and talk to you about all types of crazy stuff. They're like, I don't know if you should be talking to me about that. But with that, I went into teaching in 21, I think it was. So
just because the JV work was becoming or the juvenile hall work was becoming just too much for you, or
honestly, it was both, right? Like I wanted to get back to art, and for me, art was completely separate from social work, and I wanted to find a way that I can blend the two because it's hard to be a father, husband, artist, and a social worker.
Yeah.
So
you must have just been emotionally drained every day with that all on your plate. Jesus, that's a lot.
So a friend of mine was already a teacher. He's teaching music production in like a hip hop class, but he's also a CTE teacher, which is career technical education, where they take professional artists and put them to teach the role that they know to kind of guide the kids into that career path. So he was bringing me in as a hip hop educator because, there's like funding and you can become a teacher. So I'm like, okay, cool. I would love to teach a hip hop class. So I started doing that, but then he realized, oh, you also are a visual artist. Mm-hmm. So his school happened to be hiring for a visual artist. He was already the hip hop teacher. So I got the job as the visual artist. But still, I'm going there thinking I'm going to teach animation. And little did I know, when I walk in the classroom, all the kids are like, man, I hate art. I don't know why they put me in this class.
Nice. First day one. Yeah.
Right. So I began to realize that my job wasn't to teach animation. Like my job was to show them that what they perceive as impossible is possible. So like, you believe that you can't draw, I'm going to show you that you can, because if I could show you that you can take this one thing that you think I have a gift, you think I was born with some magical gift that you weren't born with, so you can't possibly ever do what you see me do.
Which is bullshit, because you're just a grinder and you just figured it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So that became my job, was to show them that they could figure it out,
Yeah.
And that was beautiful. It was eye-opening because you had kids in the beginning of the semester would screw around and just be like kind of class clown. And then a few months in, are like, man, I didn't know I was an artist. Or they're showing their parents work, and their parents are like, you didn't do that. Like, somebody else did that for you,
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. But with the school experience and COVID, we were still like having a quarantine because school had just started back. They just started letting the kids go back to school. So I was kind of a guinea pig in that sense, like new to teaching and the COVID experience of teaching. So with that, I would be teaching the class in class, but then you have some students who are quarantining, so you have to teach them through the computer. So I have a laptop going that I'm trying to Zoom with kids at home while teaching the kids that's in the class, and it was just a lot.
That is a lot. Just just on the technical aspect alone,
Yeah.
that's a lot of heavy lifting for a teacher, especially an art teacher who's not supposed to be super technical. Like you're supposed to just be there teaching, kids how to bring out some artistic inspiration, and instead of having to like run 3 laptops and 4 kids in 3 different, parts of the city.
Right. And not to mention all the kids like trying to sneak and be on their cell phones and TikTok and the behavioral issues. And like I said, the stuff just kind of ramped up. So are you dealing with stuff with kids trying to do TikToks in class while class is going on? They're in the back of the room trying to dance for TikTok. And it's like,
how hard is how hard is it now being a teacher with dealing with kids that are on social media all the time? Like, it must be impossible.
It's horrible. Like, and
because when you and I went to school, we didn't have phones, and the internet was like
Game Boy.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't have a Walkman. Like,
yeah. A Walkman, yeah, with an actual tape deck. Remember those? Yeah.
So, it's no secret there's a teaching crisis in America. And I think my perception is that's partly why. Spoke with a lot of teachers that I was working with, because my experience was horrible. And they were like, man, it didn't used to be like this, like such and such. But the social media thing and the phones is a real problem. And even in the sense of, I had students who their parents would call their cell phones while they're in class.
Yeah.
Like, why is your mom calling you?
Just to make sure she's in class? Yeah.
You know what I mean? I caught a girl in the back of the room. She's like sneaking, talking on the phone. I'm like, man, like, what are you doing? You can't be on the phone. Like, she's like, mister, it's my mom. Like, I'm thinking she's lying because calling you. And I look at the phone, it's really her mom. And I'm like, dude, your mom doesn't know that you're in class. Like, yeah, it's just wild. It's a wild time.
Yeah. What do you think, between the juvenile youth experience and the experience that you've had in education, like, where do you see, like, any glaring issues that could be, like, just super easy to change or just make the experience that much better? I mean, you must have a list of experience. Yeah.
I have a million experiences. I don't know if anything's easy to change.
Low-hanging tough fruit.
I think it all in our society boils down to the way that we treat each other, and I think our society, we treat each other with a lot of hostility, and like you said, there's pros and cons, right? So our individualism has like byproducts that's not so great for our society, and that's kind of dealing with, said before, and so I don't know how to fix that per se, because we're married to our individualism. Like, that's part of being American,
right?
But we don't like the byproducts that it's creating. So,
well, especially, I mean, when you think of America, like when you think of the lower 48 states, and then you think of Alaska and Hawaii, and then you think of like these massive cities like Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York,
right?
You definitely see patterns of like social behavior, patterns of crime, and patterns of more people falling through the cracks because there isn't a social safety net here like there is in other countries. And that's a whole nother topic. Like, maybe the social safety net isn't useful, or maybe it's just a waste of government money. Like, we can deal with our own problems, but in order to deal with your own problems, you have to have a support system. And I just feel like the bigger the United States gets, the more people who are here. I just feel like there's more people falling through the cracks or don't have people around them who care. And it's terrifying.
It's a land of exploitation too. Like, it's we celebrate capitalism because, you get, you're an entrepreneur and you have your freedoms and you can have your own. But at the same time, it sets us up where we want to exploit each other, and there's always going to be somebody at the bottom of the pyramid, and nobody wants to be the person at the bottom of the pyramid. So they're begin to fight each other to claw out of the space, because life is competition, And for some, there parts of that is like pros to it, right? There's pros to competition. Like competition makes us better and produce. We create out of competition things that are, good for society, but then we also tear each other down in competition and treat each other in ways that aren't healthy for society. So
But I think one thing about the United States that is very impressive is that a lot of it is a merit-based, society where people kind of look at you as a blank slate until you do something. And then if you do something, then people will respect you for what you do, and then you can do kind of more of it. Whereas I feel like in
my experience has been totally different.
Yeah, walk me through.
It's stereotypes in itself. There's prejudice in itself. Like, you never get to walk in the room and just be a blank slate, because there's so much, like I said before, like the world has been labeled before we even got here, right? So like, 18-year-old African-American youth, NWA has already existed, Snoop Dogg has already existed, 50 Cent has already existed. So like, all of this imagery of the young black kid is a thug, it's already existed, and it's impossible to erase that from the psyche. We'll take it away from people and just say cake. If all your life you've eaten cake and cake was sweet, a cake is on the table and I'm going to expect it to be sweet. I'm not going to expect it to be savory, and that's just the way that that life works as we've experienced life. So, and especially like you've been fortunate, you've lived in a lot of different countries, right? But most people, they just live in the bubble of, they're born in El Segundo, grow up in El Segundo, they go to schools in El Segundo is all they know. So like the African-American people, in a large part, is what they see through movies and hear on the radio or see on TV. And unfortunately, we choose to use our media to paint these same stereotypes, right? Like we rap about the stereotype that we don't like people to view us as, but that has an effect on our youth too, to where they don't get to walk into the room and you're not going
to have a clean slate.
Yeah, you're not going to have a clean slate.
I think what I meant to say, perhaps I didn't say it correctly, was that, you're an artist. And that idea was put into your head when you were 5 or 6 years old by people around you who supported you, who looked at your creative pursuits and said, "Oh, you're great at art. You're now an artist." So, in some ways, I was kind of referencing back to that, like where you could have grown up playing the guitar, and someone who cared for you said, "Oh my God, you have some talent. You're a musician. You should go to. We need to get you some lessons, or support your passion for music." Like we have in the United States, I feel like you have that flexibility to pursue those avenues if you have enough kind of support around you, and you can kind of quote unquote be anything. Now, obviously there's huge challenges to that, socioeconomic challenges to that. Kids that don't grow up with parents or whatever don't even get a start into something like that. But at least, if you do have some support and someone does believe in you and helps, define who you are or define a skill that you want to try to develop. Like, I think that here flourishes more than anywhere else maybe in the world.
Well, yeah, I think that's the rough part about it, though, is that we're in a space where it's a competition, and there are those that have that, and then there are those that don't have that, and they're viewed as equal.
Yeah, and they're not equal at all.
Right.
Yeah.
But we live in a society where they're viewed as equal. Like you can equally, the kid from the bubble in the rough part of town is viewed just as equal as the kid who gets the adventure and see everything. And they're judged accordingly. And I think that's the hard part about it, is judged.
or maybe that's the mistake, right? Is that we judging everyone equally. If they come from less fortunate backgrounds, that's probably the mistake.
And how do The problem is how can you not? It's a bit of a catch-22, you know, because if you don't judge them equally, then what does that get you? You know what I mean? Then you're walking around, again, like, and that was the thing I was speaking on before, is from the outsider, then you don't know what is their culture and what is the dysfunction. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm making excuses for why you can't get ahead, well, of course, you grew up and you lived in Compton all your life and you never experienced anything, and I'm making excuses for you. That's not necessarily helping you, because we can't identify the difference between what's the difference between you exploiting the crutches and you actually like needing this leg up, you know, because that's another thing that I experience in working with the foster youth is oftentimes people will, if they don't want to do something, they'll find a way to get you to do the thing for them that they don't want to do.
Right.
You know? And so how do you know the difference between what they actually can't do and what they just don't feel like doing?
It's interesting. You know, I find the other day I had a combat vet in here sitting with me, and we were just chatting about, he was in Iraq and fighting abroad and stuff like that. And he was just mentioning how difficult it was coming back into society, and how he's had quite a few friends who have committed suicide, and he almost took his own life. And it got pretty heavy. But he was just saying like how underfunded, you know, the Veterans Association is to deal with vets that come back and to help them get jobs and be placed in communities and to have a support network. And then when these things fall through, they spiral and eventually sometimes take their lives. And it was heartbreaking because, you know, to be in the military in the United States is such a big thing. It's like there's, you know, Army versus Navy football games, and you know, you see all these planes and projection of military power all around the world, and it's supposed to be a thing of quite pride, and then you come back and then you have no support, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And I feel like in a society like a Western society, a wealthy society, you know, and as bad as it is in the United States is so much wealthier than many places I've been to around the world. Like, we're supposed to put all this emphasis on children, and we're supposed to put all this emphasis on education, and we're supposed to put this emphasis on growing up and being whatever you want to be, or having those dreams, right? And then we have foster programs that aren't well funded. We have got juvenile youth kids that are out of control. Like, there's no, to me, it seems like there's a disconnect between what's being said and like what's being done.
What's cared about, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the disconnect is not taking responsibility. You know, like if there's something, say if I'm raising my kids and I have bad habits that are causing me to be abusive to them, which is then the byproduct is their behavior is acting out. But then I want to focus on them acting out, but I don't want to accept the fact that it's my behavior that's causing that. And I feel like in our society, there's a lot of ways that we treat each other, like even going back to the, you know, the individualism and just exploiting each other. There's so much exploitation going on so many different levels. Me as an artist and a rapper, and I'm just on social media, and constantly all day long there's somebody trying to pitch me a how-to scheme, like how to get more streams on Spotify, or how to meet A&Rs, how to get your music career from here to here, how to gain 1 million followers in a year. Like, everybody's pitching to me.
And picking on your insecurities as an artist.
Exactly.
Right.
How to flip a house.
Yeah.
How to get in the real estate game. How to start crafting and sell your... Everybody has a how-to pitch to exploit those that are just trying to make it and get by. Like, everybody's a hustler now.
Yeah. That's a post-COVID world.
Yeah.
Everyone
and it's tearing us apart because we can't even trust each other. You know, like I can't trust you as a person that, like, you're a little further ahead of me, and so you can actually give me some advice to help me. But do I know that, or are you just somebody that just figured out some fancy words to sell to me for $19.99? You know,
Yeah.
or do you really want to help me? Like, you're just figuring out a way to pitch to me so you can get 50 from me, 50 from him, 50 from him, and you become a millionaire off of exploiting people's dreams.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's and in this country, that's considered a great business model. People are rewarded for that constantly,
right,
on television,
right.
Yeah.
So
where everyone can see.
and the person who's like exploited, how do they begin to feel? Like, how do we begin to treat each other? We're all like just fighting and competition. Like, if we're all competition, like, when do we begin to be a team?
Yeah.
Like, a team helps each other.
There is no team. There is no team. Yeah.
And so I think that's a problem. Like,
Yeah.
because if we function as a team, then we help each other. You know, like, you might have fruit, I might have grain. You know, like, you might have cows and milk, and we can all come together and have a meal. But by yourself, you just got milk.
Yeah.
You know,
It's not going to work. Yeah. I feel like you touched on something earlier, and I felt like, you know, with whether it's the school system, whether it's the juvenile hall system, whether it's the Veterans Association, I feel like in this country more than any other that I've been to anyways, there's like a real like passing of the buck. So I feel like there's this game of chicken between like the state government or the regional, like the city government, the state government, the federal government, the NGO, you know, a nonprofit organization that might deal with like one specific thing. And like all these people are trying to tackle the same problem, but no one wants to like really come in and fix anything because obviously there's an ecosystem there. There's a donor problem. Like, it's just like everyone's just kind of waiting for someone else to step up and do something. Meanwhile, like nothing's really getting done, and good people like yourself are, you know, fighting the good fight, but not really seeing the change that you would like to see. And I'm kind of putting those words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I got from our conversation. Like, you're still waiting to see, you know, some real positive change, even though you've been working at this for more than 15 years.
Yeah. And I think that's what drove me back into music. Like, that's what drove me back into art, because I realized, like, I need to be able to try to reach people on a larger scale and not just the one kid that I went to go visit in a hall talking to them, you know, not patting myself on the back, but I've realized over the years, over 15 years of talking with people, like, there's beneficial things to, like, thoughts that come up in my head, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's about sharing that, and hopefully collectively we can get to just a healthier society, more harmony. You're not going to fix the world. Like, we're never going to make the world a perfect place. There's always pros and cons to everything. Sure. But we can address some of the woes. Like, it doesn't have to be as bad. You know?
It's true. Like, you know, and for me, having been a kind of a world traveler, I've seen some crazy stuff. And it's amazing how much of our like animalistic tendencies or our kind of raw human nature is not civilized. You know, like our fight or flight, you know, instinct, or our desire to protect our loved ones, you know, from a potential attack from someone else. Like, there's all these things that we have innate in us for tens of thousands of years, and now we're all expected to like live next to each other and like wave hello in the morning. Remember the Truman Show with Jim Carrey? Like, that's kind of like our bullshit kind of perfect society, right? And it's just not going to happen. Like, we're too competitive with each other, like you said, exploiting people. Like, we're too, you know, there's this idea that in order for me to go up, you have to go down.
Yeah.
And there's I don't know what happened along the way, but it seems like we've lost this, again, like this idea of like collective participation in a better life. And that I'm not saying collective as in like communism, because that's obviously not the answer either. I did 18 years in China. It was not the answer. But there has to be like some idea of collective well-being.
Yeah. There has to be a happy medium. But because we demonize the other side will never be able to get to the medium, like, for instance, like capitalism, communism, and where like I'm in a capital, like it's, dare you say anything close to socialism or so as long as we demonize those ideas, then we'll never be able to get to the middle ground, which is best for all of us, because clearly being extreme capitalist is not working out for it doesn't look like it's working out to me. But then, like you said, you experience life in communism, and that wasn't ideal either.
Also has its issues, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but if we cannot demonize it, then it opens us up to be able to look at it and say, okay, well, what pieces of it can work? You know what I mean? Like, if I look at something that's just purely evil, I'm never going to touch any of it. Anything that looks close to it we got to get rid of that as soon as we can,
Yeah.
That's kind of how we function in this country.
Absolutely. I was joking with someone the other day, like I said, I was very fortunate. I went to the University of Toronto and I studied like international politics, which kind of gave me this idea to travel and see the world. But I was joking with someone the other day, we were having a drink, and I said, like, I want a refund back from my university, because my university taught me how to think critically, accept other points of view, and even defend opposing points of view from my own, so that I understand it better, so that I can defend my own point of view in a better way. And I don't get to use any of these skills in society anymore, because everything is so polarized. No one wants to talk. No one wants to have a friendly debate, and no one wants to think creatively or argue in a respectful way. Everyone is just shouting at each other. It's like, you don't get anything from that.
Yeah. That's kind of like when I was saying that the song I'm releasing, "The Hate Is Love," is kind of like what I touch on too. Is like is that exact thing? Like, like, can we have conversation? Like, me just wanting to have conversation about it, I'm a hater now. Like, it's not hate, like, I can respect you even with you having completely different opinions, different perspective. It's all good. Like, we could still walk away and be respected. But in a day of social media, it's people being extremely disrespectful over who's the GOAT, Michael Jordan or LeBron James.
Yeah. And don't forget Kobe or Bird or Magic. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you'll sit there and
or Mr. Oscar Robertson, triple double man. I mean, let's or Wilt, 10 rings, 11 rings. Come on.
That's Bill Russell.
Oh, that is Bill Russell. That's right. Wilt didn't have all the rings, but did you see the documentary on Netflix about Bill Russell?
Yeah.
That was fucking good.
Amazing.
I'm sorry I got off on a tangent.
No,
All right, go back.
Good. But so I guess my point is just people will find the smallest things to rip each other apart and just so disrespectful that we can't even get to a space where we need to have the real conversations that we need to have in society. We can't even get to that space because it's just so much.
I think what's happening now, and I would love to get your opinion on this. I think what's happening now is like people, I think especially since COVID, people just want to retreat into their bubbles and just don't want to deal with other people. Like I find this more now than at any other time in my life. Like I feel like people are just dismissive of other people. They can't be bothered. There's no kind of, desire to help. Everyone's just kind of like, I feel like even though COVID is over and we're no longer self-isolating, everyone is like emotionally self-isolating, and everyone is just kind of like intensely worried about their own tribe or their own, 10 people in their life that are important to them.
Right.
And it's just fuck the rest of the world. And like, how do we move on from that? And I feel like COVID has exponentially increased that feeling. And I feel it. Like I feel it in me because I just felt like COVID brought out all this craziness, and you saw it in the Juvenile hall, and you saw it in your school and stuff like that. It brought out all this craziness that it made people like me, and maybe you too, or friends of yours. It made us kind of almost want to retreat back from the chaos. But But being in the chaos is where you help people, right? Or where you have influence, or where you can make someone's life better, or make a difference. But if you're not willing to go out into that space and you just want to stay back in your safe space all the time, then you're never going to really touch anyone. And I feel like everyone's just so afraid of like helping nowadays. And I feel like since 2020, this has just gone through the roof.
I think, I don't know, COVID showed us life is short. Like, I used to think I had forever, and I found myself running out of forever. You know, like,
well, we're both in our mid-40s. Yeah, that shit starts to hit you at some stage. Yeah,
I think COVID did that for a lot of people, where like, you just believe that you had so much time, and that like COVID making us all sit down and seeing people like pass away, like just randomly out of nowhere, like so many different people passing away and sick, and it just began to feel like time is shorten the time. And so because that the thing that you're speaking on, and the people only caring about like their small tribe, I think all of that stuff was there, but COVID ramped it up, because
I've been elevated.
What do you really care about? And it was like, well, what I really care about is this 10, like, and I think that's kind of the thing that, I mean, I know it's speculation.
No, but it's like when I listen to your story, for example, I'm inspired that you can have a wife and a child and still dedicate so much of your time and emotional energy to working with kids in juvenile hall. Like I'm either too selfish to explore that path, or I know myself and I don't have the emotional bandwidth to take it on. Like I don't know if I know myself too well and I'm just like, I can't do that, or I'm too afraid to try it because I'm selfish, but you've embraced it, in a way that so few people have, and given back in a way that so few people have. And it's inspiring. And I feel like I feel like specifically since COVID, since we've all retracted back into like our little bubbles, there's less and less people willing to go out into the world and to try, just to try to make someone's life better. Yeah. It's not easy, man. Oh, okay. I know you have to run in a bit, but anything you're looking forward to in 2024? Anything that's coming out? Anything that we can direct traffic to? What are you creating this year that's going to be epic?
Constantly creating. Well, yeah, that's the great thing is my website is like the hub for everything. So yeah, GaKnew.com.
Yeah,
but
I saw you've got clothing on there, you've got your music on there, you've got your art on there. It's impressive, man.
That was like kind of an idea. I just thought because you sell prints, like you do a painting, but when you're dealing with the general public, like the general public, they aren't art collectors. You know what I mean? Like, and they don't want to pay for. I could put like 1,000 hours into a painting, nobody's gonna pay you for that. Like. Well, there's people who will pay, but there's few. But then people still like the artwork. So then you do prints and you sell prints. But then a print is just hanging in someone's house. Whereas like if I do the print on clothing, then I don't know, the world that I'm living in, it seems like people their clothing is an expression, like the art is an expression, and having it on the clothing, they get to have that expression in the.
They get to participate in the artist's vision. Right. Yeah. No, I get that.
So yeah, that's kind of how the whole clothing thing came along, is just putting my original artwork on the clothing.
Amazing.
Yeah. So.
And you're releasing music now, currently on your website.
Yeah.
Great.
Easing the song in the morning.
That's great.
Yeah. I'm taking on the motto of just only putting singles on the streaming services and housing the catalog of music, so the albums on my website, to try to drive traffic to the website, because the streaming services, I don't know if you're aware, but like streaming is like 0.003 cents for every time someone streams a song. So
that's tough to pay for dinner and pay for rent on that, unless you're Taylor Swift or Weekend or something like this, right? Yeah.
I think you need like 4 million streams a month in order to just live like a basic everyday life.
Yeah.
How I live right now. 4 million streams, that's extreme. Like,
yeah, someone told me it was like 100,000 or a few 100,000 streams just to raise like $1,000. I guess it was like 400,000 streams or something for $1,000.
But yeah. Probably it's like 250,000 streams or something. Like it's just it's outrageous to think that when I was younger I could sell a CD, and it's still actually by my EP being on the website, and I just like people could pay whatever they want, so I don't have like a set price. The public pays whatever they want, whatever they feel like it's worth. I had someone pay $40 for the EP. I'm like, dude, $40. You know how many streams it would have taken me to get
Yeah.
$40? Like,
those are the great benefactors of art. I mean, they recognize that you need to make a living from your art,
right?
And they just want to chip in and help. And I think that's one of the great things that like social media and music has allowed, like for you to build a brand as an artist, and then for allowing people to come in and help if they see fit, right?
Yeah.
And then having those people come in and overpaying, knowing that they're helping you just make more art because they like it, right?
And I think that's the thing is like beyond just liking it. I think because there is a point to the music, like there's a message in the music, and I think there's people who appreciate that, and so they support that because like I have a song. It's on my website, but I haven't released it on streaming services yet, but called The System, and kind of exploring the thoughts from me working in the system, but then what is the system really, and dives into a lot of other things. It's food for thought is what my music is. So, and I think there's people who support that and appreciate that, and so that's why they'll pay $40 to,
Yeah, I think we should all be paying $40 to get in and keep because it keeps you thinking, right? It keeps you, and I think the number one, fail safe for all of us is to just stop thinking, right? Or turn off that emotion or turn off that tool,
right? So
that we just become numb, right? But in order for an artist to keep creating or to keep having a message, like they need to have food on their table, and then you get more art from it. And then if it's making change and it's making good, or if it's just making you feel good, like you need to monetarily support that. It's wonderful. Like I think that's the one great tool that you and I have as storytellers or artists today that we didn't have 20 years ago. Yeah, because I ain't printing any CDs anytime soon. Oh, man, I know you got to go, but I just want to say I'm super thankful you swung by. I appreciate you. Great conversation. If you ever want to come back again, just let me know. And I'm just going to switch to this guy, and we can shake it out.
All right.
Thank you, man. Thank you for coming out.
Appreciate it.
Really, really great chat. Beautiful.